Before I start this video, if everyone who's willing could give my dad a happy 60th birthday wish in the comments, that'd be much appreciated. He'll probably see this video before I see him today, because he always watches my videos as soon as they go out. So happy birthday, Dad, I love you, and enjoy the comments. But anyway, here we go. It's finally time for me to do a Skylanders episode. I tested the waters a little bit by using Spyro and Skylanders lore in my famous Dragons as Zombies episode, and from that it seemed like lots of people really wanted me to do a full Skylanders episode. So here we are. I'm gonna do one of my classic sort of things and take some, sorta cute-ish kinds of monsters and make them much more freaky, bigger, more monstrous monsters. And of course tell a story based on Skylanders lore, set in the world of Tayrin, the Beast Chronicler, who narrates all my dragon videos. Really happy with the art in this episode, so I'm excited for y'all to see it, so let's just get into it now, shall we? Let's go. Hit like, if you want. Subscribe, if you feel like. But either way, enjoy the show. The more my eyes have been open to the magic of my world, the more I realize I used to see life through a very narrow lens. I was once more reminded of this as I was soaring across the Atlantic on the back of my dragon ally, Violet, when I spotted a cluster of islands I hadn't recalled ever being aware of or seeing charted on any maps. We landed on the largest one and I explored. It was dense with trees, but lacking any miraculous qualities, until I found a large stone platform with runes carved into it in the midst of the forest. It looked similar to the portals I'd seen on the mining colony isles, but the language was clearly different. I didn't recognize it, but my abilities as the overseer of my world made me able to read it as, "On a portal master's whim, beasts shall rise." Soon after, I noticed through more of the bush that there was a carved stone figure about half my size nearby, with vines growing over it. It seemed to portray some sort of red golem. But the odd thing was, I could see that this statue possessed massive amounts of dormant energy within it. It seemed practically alive, but unmoving. It wasn't hard to put together a theory of how to awaken said energy, but the question then stood, is this a beast I want to awaken? But of course my curiosity got the better of me, and to be fair, I was in the middle of the ocean, and even if this creature was dangerous, I doubted highly that it could swim to a populated area. I heaved the statue over to the platform and lifted it into the center. I barely had time to step back before the entire thing lit up. Orange light emanated from within the statue, and a plume of lava erupted from it, shooting straight into the sky. The odd thing was, it didn't come back down. I ran over to Violet and did my best to follow where it had gone, unsure if I could even find it. It seemed as though the lava had shot straight into space. But well above the highest clouds, where the air was barely breathable, I finally saw a series of what I can only describe as flying islands. I flew above these mysterious skylands until I spotted an orange glow on one of the nearer ones. Swooping in close, I finally saw where the lava had wound up. The once small stone golem I'd seen below had turned into a 20-foot towering beast, with molten rock dripping from its hands, feet, and mouth. I kept my distance, but it soon spotted me. Unsure of what it would do, I waited. After a moment, it bowed to me, then turned to lumber inland, gesturing for me to follow along. Violet and I landed and kept cautiously back, avoiding the trail of lava that the creature left in its wake. It was a slow walk behind the erupting molten beast, but all the while I was completely enthralled by observing the floating isles all around. Some even had waterfalls that seemed to spill into the clouds and vanish. When we got through the mountains we'd arrived on, we passed through what seemed as though it used to be a village. There were burnt and destroyed homes, and what even seemed to be a castle in the distance, or at least the crumbled remains of one. There were even some skeletons that looked somewhat humanoid, but shorter and wider. It's unclear what these beings may have been, but my best guess is they were the prime residents of these lands. So, what had happened to them? I sensed no ill intent from the creature I followed, so had it been a protector, perhaps forcibly sealed away from this world so it could no longer save these poor beings? I had many questions, but as we approached a wooded area, those temporarily vanished from my mind as survival instincts kicked in. A light creaking sound that could very well have been nothing caught my attention from above. My eyes shot up, and then my hand shot down to the hilt of my blade as I spotted an eerie, 10-foot-tall imp-like creature with blades protruding from its wrists perched on a tree above, staring down at us. From its angry eyes and eerie toothed grin, it was easy to assume that the creature was hostile, but it didn't attack, so I slowly removed my hand from my weapon. It looked from me over to the golem I followed. There was a slight puff of green smoke around the stealthy imp, but it seemed to stay in place. But I almost jumped out of my skin as another of it appeared out of nowhere right next to me and walked towards the golem. I looked back up, and after a moment, the version in the tree faded into nothingness. Some sort of illusion caused by the creature, I supposed. The two creatures looked at each other. I assumed they were communicating somehow, but the way was beyond me. After a moment, the imp turned and looked at me again. Her glowing, pale eyes almost felt to burrow into my soul, but she soon bowed to me as the golem had. She then flipped over the golem and ran further into the woods, springing up into another tree, then waiting as the golem followed with me and Violet close in tow. It seemed what we'd just found was an ally, and my best guess was we were seeking another. But if my hunch was right that these were friendly, protective creatures, what had they failed to protect these lands against? While we trudged along after the imp, I was initially worried that the golem's leaking lava would start a forest fire, but seconds after the lava would hit the land, it would harden and leave all the surrounding foliage unaffected. I took this as a further sign that these creatures were protectors of this land, if their biology adapted to keep it safe. And as anticipated, we soon found another protector. We came to the opposite end of the island where there was a set of waterfalls. One came down into a river from a mountain, though I have no idea what the source of this water was and how it hadn't run out, and the next poured off the side of the Skyland towards the earth below. But after a few hundred feet, it almost seemed as though the water vaporized into clouds. That could explain why I'd never heard reports of these floating islands. From below, they were constantly blocked by clouds. My attention was soon refocused as a creature leapt out of the water and loomed on a rock before us. This one was slightly smaller than the ogre, but looked nearly as agile as the imp. It had the body of a jungle cat mixed with a gecko, horns like a bull, and a shark-like head. Sparking water spilled from its mouth as it eyed our strange group. It looked from the two creatures down to Violet and me. It purred out a growling sound that I interpreted as positive, though I'm not entirely sure why. It could easily have been a threat. The creature charged off to the first waterfall and leapt through it. A moment later, it swam through the water with a rope clenched in its teeth. It slowly dragged out a long flying machine that had a massive oval balloon carrying a stone and wooden basket, easily large enough for all of us to fit inside. The creatures all stepped in, then looked to me. I walked into the vehicle, then noticed a steam-powered steering system. The creatures all looked from it to me. It seemed they needed someone my size to fly it. Perhaps in times prior, the civilians of these islands would help these creatures get from one land to the next. Regardless, it was up to me now. It took me a few minutes to figure out the controls, but soon we were off the ground and floating forward. The sparking water creature spat beams of water ahead and off to the left. I took that as directions and steered us onward, with Violet flying on beside. After an hour and a half of floating along, the creatures all seemed to be eyeing the skies above and below anxiously. Violet let out a cautious grunt and stared up towards some of the clouds above. She fired up into those clouds, but the instant she did, there was an eruption of purple lightning from within. Seconds later, she dropped from the sky, crashing to one of the floating islands below. I immediately steered us towards her, but my eyes were aimed up to the cloud, where soon, swooping through the mist, came a monstrous black dragon that all my new allies seemed to recognize as we readied for battle. We were still 100 feet above the island when the dragon swooped down past us and slashed a hole in our balloon. I held tight as the vehicle spun through the air and crashed down, just making it to the edge of the Skyland. We all spilled out of the machine. I ran towards Violet, but before I could get to her, the stealthy imp grabbed my shoulder. It pulled me back to the downed vehicle and pointed at a small cabinet I hadn't noticed before. I pulled it open, and inside were a set of vials, some broken, but a few were intact, containing a purple liquid. The imp then pointed up to the dragon as it weaved through the sky, dodging cannons of electric water and globs of lava. I understood well enough. I grabbed 3 vials and slipped them into my boot, then ran again to check on Violet. She was breathing, but in no shape to fly me anywhere. Luckily, our dragon foe was at least getting closer. It fired balls of flame and lightning that shattered stones all around me. The water beast was able to dodge out of the way with ease. The golem was taking hits, but they didn't seem to faze it much. Soon though, the dragon swooped down and swung its tail with a massive bone weapon at its end. The golem was smacked across the ground and rolled away. But in that attack, the imp had been able to leap onto the dragon's back and crawled up towards its neck. The dragon quickly noticed and started whipping around in a circle over and over again. The imp held tight at first, but soon its grip slipped and it soared off towards the ocean below. There was nothing I could do, and through the clouds I noticed that as it fell, it shrunk and turned into a stone statue. The dragon stopped its spiral and was clearly dizzy, shaking its head and hovering lower and lower, now flying below the land we were on. It seemed like my best shot at this point. I sprinted to our downed vehicle and grabbed a frayed rope that I hoped would be long enough. I tossed one end to the water beast, hoping it would understand, which it did. It snatched the other end in its mouth and held tight, while I sprinted off to the cliff and leapt. My stomach lurched as I fell, but soon my body thudded against the dragon's neck, and I held tight. I quickly pulled one of the vials from my boot, but in doing so, the other 2 slipped out and fell towards the ocean. One shot was all I had. I pulled towards the beast's head, barely avoiding its sparking horns, but it whipped around. I lost grip on the rope and clenched tight to its neck. My safety line was gone, and to make things worse, it soon reeled its head down, then whipped up. I lost grip completely and hurled into the air, but the beast's mouth opened in a roar beneath me. I instinctively whipped the vial back down, and it shot straight into the creature's throat. It was clearly displeased, but I couldn't see much of what occurred next, as my ascent stopped and I fell towards the ocean. Unfortunately, I couldn't turn to stone to keep safe. I thought through every overseer ability I had that could help. Maybe the fall wouldn't even kill me, maybe there was something inherent in my abilities I hadn't explored that could keep me alive. But as my body spun and my mind reeled, I was snatched out of the air by a purple claw. My mind immediately jumped to Violet, but this was far too large a claw for her. I turned my head up to see the dragon I'd just been fighting was now a much friendlier color and seemed to be grinning smugly at me. We flew back up and I was placed down among the other 2 creatures. The dragon nuzzled its head against both of them, and they all seemed quite happy. I couldn't fully understand what had transpired here yet, but before I even tried, I felt there was something more urgent that needed my attention. I looked down towards the ocean below. How many dormant stone figures were in the depths of the sea, waiting to be awakened, along with the now stone stealthy imp? I was quite determined to find out. And there we have some monstrous Skylanders. I am really happy with how all the art in this episode came out, so I'm definitely happy to do another round. I'm curious to see how this video does, if people end up being really into it, because I was definitely really into it, even though I haven't really played any of the Skylander games, admittedly. But I know a decent amount about the lore now. Used a bit from the games and a bit from the show to inspire this, but obviously the way I handled Dark Spyro was more inspired by the show. But anyway, if you do want another round of this, give me suggestions for which Skylanders you'd like me to use in the comments. And if you're new to the channel and want to check out something similar, with of course the same narrator, Taerin, I recommend checking out the Minecraft Monsters episodes. Same sort of thing, taking some simple kinds of characters and redesigning them into more fleshed out monstrous versions of themselves. Got lots of that on this channel. But besides that, that's all for today. I'm Christian Pearson, this has been Popcraft Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and I will see you all in the next episode on Monday. Goodbye!